Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our Square One, everything you need to know every day about business. We are going to be joined today by Jill Hathaway, who is one of our friends over at the Missouri SBDC, which is also part of UMKC. I'm going to pop her on screen here in a second, and we'll also be joined by Susan Brown, who is our contact at the Central Bank. And they help us put together these Eat and Educate lunchtime series every other month with different topics, business this, business that. We cover it all. I'm going to bring Jill on screen. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. We are getting going here. If you want to just take a quick second and introduce yourself, then if Susan is there and she wants to hop on and say hello.
Absolutely, Megan. Thank you. I'm Jill Hathaway. As Megan said, I'm a business development consultant with the Missouri SBDC at UMKC, so the Small Business Development Center located at 4747 Troost. We work with clients that are pre-concept, new venture, growth and scale, and succession planning. And today we're going to be talking to you about funding. Thank you.
Hello, Susan.
Susan Brown, kind of excited to be here in person. We're at our Parkville branch today. And I work with our business customers here at Central Bank of the Midwest. And we have been doing this partnership with the Continent Public Library for I don't know how many years, several years, at least 5 years. So we've been completely virtual for the last year and a half. And we thought we'd try it. We've got couple people here with us in the room, so it's kind of exciting. I'm glad to see everybody and can't wait to hear more about what Jill has to say.
Thanks for being here again with us today, Susan. It's good to see you as always. All right, well, Jill, I'm going to bring up your slides and we'll just kick this off. A couple of quick housekeeping items. One would be for those folks out there watching from Facebook. Take a second. Get in there in their comments, type your name, let us know who you are, where you're from, what your business is. And then feel free throughout the class in those comments to type any question that you have. We'll make sure that Jill gets to know that you've typed that in there and is able to address those throughout the class. And lastly, I will drop a link at the end to a survey, just a short survey, a couple of questions, helps us keep doing this programming. So we'd appreciate you taking a minute and filling that out for us. So we'll stay tuned, that will come at the end of class. With no further ado, Jill, I'm going to bring up your slides and take myself off screen.
Awesome, Megan. Thank you so much. As Susan said, it's great to see people in person and love to be able to share virtually as well, too. So most small business owners are constantly looking for ways to improve their funding, their business, their growth and sales, right? So our discussion today, we're going to review areas of business focus and being prepared to fund that growth. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Megan. Appreciate that. So what we're looking at today on this slide are certain ways that you need funding for your business. It could be expansion with your business. It could be operating expenses, payroll expenses, debt reduction, or maybe you want to replace or repair a capital asset, piece of equipment that you have. So before we dig deeper into the funding, what are some ways, or the funding ways to cover the expenses and fuel this growth? What are some other ways businesses can free up cash to fund their goals? I'll ask our audience here, and if anybody on chat wants to share, what are some other ways businesses can free up cash to fund their growth goals?
Take a look at your inventory and make sure you're not dropping money on waste or over ordering.
Awesome. So yes, take a look at your inventory, make sure that you're not over ordering, make sure that it's a good model stock inventory for products that are selling regularly, that there's not waste with it.
And that made me think about looking at your accounts receivable, maybe collecting those a little bit faster.
Collecting those faster. Yes, Susan, absolutely. Finding the quickest way to help your customers pay you would be ideal too. Anybody on chat have any thoughts on other ways that they can free up cash? Not at this moment? Okay. Well, some of the ways that we can do that is through cash generation or to increase prices, right? If we increase our prices, then that actually will increase some of the cash that's coming into the business And, hopefully then we retain our customers and they're willing to pay that price. So raising prices is easy, but it's how you raise them that really matters. Sometimes price increases around 10% are not noticeable by the customers. Think about how much your favorite cup of coffee, has changed in price, right? But for price increases that are more than 10%, a type of communication or enrollment strategy would be ideal. And then that allows your client, your customer, to have emotional buy-in to accept that increase in price. So give them a little time to absorb it and then accept that increase in price. How many of you guys have gone to McDonald's and said, supersize? Another way to generate cash is to supersize and upsell, to strategize with upselling. So the idea is that by upselling a better, a larger service, the client gets, or at least feels, that they're getting an increased value. Yet for you, the costs that are provided are not exponentially increased. It's pretty much the same, but you're getting that increased value. So it's an emotional buy-in for the client. And then what about, Mike, what would look really good with your outfit today would be a great brown belt with some new brown shoes. So what if we looked at cross-selling? Nordstrom's is really good at cross-selling. If we're actually going to grab a belt, or let's say I'm going to do your bookkeeping, but in order to do your bookkeeping, I want to do your payroll too, cross-selling those services. So cross-selling creates packages that are across different service types or product types that provide that value and increase that sale. And then the most challenging sale is to achieve the first one, right? If your client is happy, they often only need a reason to come back and buy from you again. So getting that client initial buy-in and getting them to come back to buy again because of the value that you're creating for them creates residual income without any additional client acquisition costs. And how many of you guys ask for client referrals? Do you ask for referrals when you're meeting with your clients, Mike? Mm-hmm. Yes. And do they turn around? Do they give you referrals pretty easily?
Some
do.
And it's all the numbers game. Yes, several of them. A lot of them will get it. Some won't.
Right. But the key is asking for those client referrals. You want to cultivate your client's voice to become a raving fan of you and of your business. That is a free salesperson for your business. And that's the most grassroots, low cost, effective way of increasing cash, of getting your clients to be those salespeople for you and give you testimonies as well as give you client referrals. And then as Susan mentioned, which is awesome, if your business has accounts receivable, if you are owed money, then making it as easy as possible for your customers to pay you. So give the clients a reason to pay you early, possibly an incentive or a discount, and then that'll open up some of your cash flow, and then you don't have to hunt them down to pay their invoices, right? And then lastly, you have a statement or question on that?
Yeah, Jill, I just want to say we're seeing more and more businesses taking credit cards. Even though there can be a cost to them, not always, but there can be a cost to them to take those credit cards. It is so offset by they don't have to make the collection calls. It just like what you just said, making it easier for their customers to pay them. And the credit cards seem to be more and more popular with our business customers.
I agree with that wholeheartedly, Susan. I mean, accepting ACH, doing some kind of wire transfer, doing credit cards, and most credit cards are tied to some business benefit or points or bonus or miles. So the company wants to utilize that because maybe then they can give that back to their employees as some type of perk as well too. So work that credit card cost into that sale, into that pricing of your service or product. I'm going to ask you a question on that too. Do you agree to work the credit card price into that product, or do you turn around and say, well, if you pay by credit card, we're going to charge you 3% or 4%?
There's a lot of legalities around that, and I can't go into that at this point, but yes, in a good processor, a good company, bank that you're working with to process credit cards with will lead you through that process correctly and keep you in compliance.
Good. Okay. That's great to know too. Because I personally get a little frustrated when they say, oh, we're going to charge 4% on that. I'm like, oh, let me get the checkbook out then, but I want to make it as easy as possible. Thank you for that. And then another way to create cash up front too is to require a deposit or a down payment on something. It could be on a product, it could be on a service, but that'll generate cash quicker as well too. And it's standard in most industries. In fact, last week, I actually am doing a service that I had to pay 25% down for, and my service won't happen for 60 days where I'll pay the balance. But that client, that business has that 25% up front so that they can generate some other marketing, buy other inventory, but they have that cash in their business quicker. So the next bullet point is cash management, and improving your cash management can completely help reduce stress in your business. You know, if you need to free up cash flow, then we need to look at different ways to free up that cash flow, and how are you managing the cash? So how many of you guys subscribe to something or do a membership and it's automatically renewed through your credit card? I'm getting a lot of head shakes and hands up. Yes. So a lot of times we really want to review. I know I'm notorious for it. You know, review those subscriptions, those memberships, those perks. 48% of surveyed participants signed up for free trials, and then they're automatically renewed through their credit card, really without their knowledge. So cancel those things, or the ones, you know, you can put on the back burner that you're not actively using or that aren't necessary for your business. This past year, we saw a lot of renegotiating of monthly costs. When money's tight, you know, expenses like rent, utilities, technology are areas where you can really work with your landlord, with your utility company to renegotiate, and then other technologies to find other lower cost savings, you know, and lower cost providers too. And then marketing, you know, every business has to have marketing. It's essential. It's essential investment for the business. But how many of us track the effectiveness of that marketing? A lot of times when we're running a little cash poor, we get rid of some of the marketing. Is that the first place that we should? Most likely not, because we need to be present and we need to be aware with our customers and with new customers. So what we really want to focus on is the effectiveness of that marketing. Are we tracking that customer and that acquisition of the customer, you know, so that we know that the marketing is working really well? And then we test and tweak accordingly. And then lastly, I always tell, we're kind of going into fourth quarter in the next couple of weeks here, is to make it an annual practice to look at little ways that money's leaking out of your business by auditing your reoccurring expenses. So pay a special attention to the costs that have gradually increased over time. Some of those could be like your phone or your internet service. Maybe when you started with a new provider, you had a promotional pricing or something with that new provider. But then after that first year of service, you get the price creep, you know, and that comes in and starts pulling away at your cash. And if you're not auditing that in your invoices or in the draw from your accounts, then they're getting the amount that they want. They got you hooked, and taking that yearly audit helps put you back in control. Yes, Susan.
I've got another comment on that. So cash management is what I do day in and day out with Central Bank. And your bank, whatever bank you're working with, talk to their cash management professionals, because they can help you in this area. Because instead of allowing those companies to pull the money out of your business account, you should be the one in control, pushing the money out, using ACH origination. It goes by a lot of different names, a lot of different banks, but talk to your bank's cash management people. They can be a wealth of information on how to better control your expenses.
That's awesome. And I love, I mean, your banks are your partners for small businesses. Mm-hmm. So having somebody that is looking at your accounts and seeing those monthly reoccurring charges that are going out, and then can question you. Are you familiar with this? Did you okay this? Is this typical? Is this something that you want? Or is it better to write that check or have a different means to pay that provider?
And when you talk about a different means, and again, going back to credit cards, this is the other side of credit cards. This is where I'm talking about, where you're paying your bills. Mm-hmm. I see more and more businesses paying their bills with credit cards, because everyone, more and more utilities take them, everyone takes them, and why not get the cash back? Make sure you work with a bank or a provider that gives you a cash back card, and then you've got that extra revenue stream right there for your business.
Awesome. So, that's absolutely. That's great too. Yeah. The revenue stream, the perks for employees, and that control and that management of that cash going out. I love hearing that too, because like I said, I owned businesses for over 20 years, and I didn't get to do it till the end of really looking at it and trying to find ways to save, but also not just saving money. Am I getting the service from that provider that I signed up for initially too? I mean, that's key. So look at, I mean, your insurance agents, your, once again, internet, phone, credit card processing, payroll, you know, anybody, any service provider that you're utilizing it. And I always think that at the end of the year, it's a good time to do that so that you're ready for the following year and can create those changes with the budget for the next year. So good predictive cash flow management allows you to see your cash decisions and impact your future so that you have the power to make informed decisions, which is exactly what, you know, Susan was sharing. And then the last bullet point here is cash efficiency. How well are we using our resources that we have within our business? And some of those resources, of course, are technology, our teams, our employees. You know, maybe we're underutilizing our resources that we have. I talk to a lot of clients that are using different financial softwares. They're using CRMs to track clients. They're using different technology softwares for their systems. And yet, do they know the full gamut of what that technology, what that software can do? A lot of times we're just touching the surface, but we're paying for the full gamut of what that software provides, right? So not to say, you know, time is always of the essence, and time is very valuable to all of our business owners because we juggle our time so much. But when you are looking at different resources, especially technology, utilize the organization or company that you're buying that from, have them train, have them reach back out to you on a regular basis to see if you're utilizing everything that you need and maximizing that. And if not, maybe you can renegotiate some of the pricing, and or maybe you can learn something that will really help your business down the line. And then I'm a believer, and I stress all the time, systems, repeatable processes in your business. When you're creating repeatable processes and documenting those processes, that allows your business to be more efficient, run more productively, and thus become more profitable too, because you're not creating the wheel every single time a fire happens or there's a pain point in your business, that you're creating and establishing those routine practices. Utilize technology for automation. Some of that can be done at a fraction of the cost and definitely at a fraction of the time. And then looking at equipment, when you're wanting to save cash and be more efficient, look to lease the equipment initially versus owning the equipment, just to test it. Is this the right piece of equipment to maximize my business that I need for my business? And then if you want to own it, absolutely. But you want to utilize first and see that it is the right piece so that you're getting the return you thought with that piece of equipment. That goes for renting versus buying too. Rent initially. Make sure that the space that you're renting or that you're in is large enough for you. I find a lot of people go to small spaces and then within 6 months to a year, they're outgrowing that space. And then they've got to renegotiate a lease or find another space. So rent and make certain that the space and the location work best for your business. And then consider subletting. I had moved back in the early 2000s from a 600 square foot space to 1,500, but then went up to 6,000 square foot space and realized that even though the rent was cheaper, it ended up being more of an empty grocery store for me because I had to fill it with that much more inventory to make it, useful, to make it look like it was full. And so I sublet it to 2 different businesses, and it worked great because then we were able to feed customers off of each other too. But we used a lot of that unused space to break even with, the rent or to be money making opportunities, be it by customer attrition as well. And then if your business doesn't have enough work, we saw that, through the past 18 months, there's maybe some unused resources with your business or there's not enough work. Consider subcontracting your employees, maybe consider subcontracting some of your teams. And that may only be a short-term solution, but at least they're working for your organization, you're subcontracting to another business and they're still working and they're, generating a paycheck. And it's short term, while you're building your business too. So those are 3 key areas: cash generation, cash management, and cash efficiency that, can be implemented. And yet, let's move to slide 4, Megan. And yet, if we still require additional funding to accelerate our growth, how do I know when I should borrow money? So ask yourself these questions, 2 questions. Is my business actually profitable? Really think about it. Is my business actually profitable? And then can I pay back the debt, right? I'm sure, Susan, you ask everybody, can they pay back the debt? So in looking at, is my business profitable? bottom line, is your net profit on your financial statements positive? Is it in the black or is it in the red? Is it negative? And if it's positive and you can afford this additional debt payment, the banks aren't going to only look at your business debt, right? They're also going to look at your personal debt, and they're going to establish a global debt coverage ratio. So business and personal, you've got it. It's going to be combined from the banks. So we may recommend what happened in the housing industry years back, right? Where a lot of people were buying houses because both partners, husband and wife, had jobs. They may have been good jobs if they both had jobs to put money into the household, right? And so they bought the house based on those two incomes. Lo and behold, someone in the family might have lost their job. Banks may lend you the money, but they can't tell you whether you should borrow the money or not. So as a business owner, we need to look at a much wider cushion than the banks use to assess, our ability to service the debt, to pay the debt. So assuming that you've passed the debt service ratio, when should you borrow money for your business? Anybody have any thoughts or comments on when you should borrow money for your business? Susan.
Okay, yeah.
She has thoughts.
I do have thoughts because that is such an interesting question. It brings to mind a customer client, a potential prospect to talk to yesterday. And this person called in and starting a new business, wanting to lease, really wanted to start establishing a relationship with a banker, not needing a whole lot of money up front, but later on he wants to buy a building. And that will be quite substantial. But I just thought it was so smart that, starting off with something small, developing a relationship with a commercial loan officer, and those commercial loan officers can be there's such a wealth of information.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want your collateral back. Banks are terrible at selling collateral. If a banker will not loan you the money, it's not the right time,
mm-hmm.
because that's their job. They want to get money out into the community, help our businesses. I think there's a lot of different times, but you really do want to start talking to a banker really before you need it, before you really, really need it, is how I would answer that question.
Absolutely. And we suggest that all the time with SBDC, is to establish that banker relationship, and actually establish a relationship. If you're at one bank, then have not just the commercial loan officer, but have that backup, because banks do move around. That's how they increase their salaries and take the clients with them. And if you love the bank and what they're doing for you, then you want to have that backup so that they still know you, that relationship is a little bit deeper. But absolutely. But truly, you should borrow money when you're confident you can make more profit as a result of borrowing that money, right? So get the relationship established. But when you're looking at borrowing money, and the money that you're going to borrow is going to not just increase sales, which is great, but it's going to give you more profit down the line. And that's a conversation to work with your bank loan officer, a conversation to work with your SCORE mentor or SBDC consultant as well too. Borrowing money when you shouldn't can be one of the biggest mistakes that small businesses make. I'll share really quick. I come from 20 years of retail stores in the Brookside Waldo area. And in the 90s, when I started, I started with my own money, $500, just something very simple, small business credit cards. And within 5 years, we were a multi-million-dollar operation, and banks came knocking on the doors right and left. They didn't come initially, as a lot of us see. They're not coming when we're starting up the business. They're coming when you are making money, and they want to be part of that partnership. So not to say that borrowing money at the time we shouldn't have. What I will say to that comment is borrowing too much money. And the banks were coming, we were moving locations, we were expanding, and increased inventory, increased operations, and a new building, as Susan mentioned. And so we actually borrowed too much money, and we're able to service it. But then, of course, things changed throughout the years, and we are personally guaranteed all of that. So do look at that. Work with your consultants as well as your banker on how much that you should borrow for the needs that you actually have. So estimating what your sales and profits are before borrowing and then what they'll be after you borrow. Megan shared with you a cash flow budget, a little worksheet that will also manage and look at what that cash flow is for your business, and understanding what that cash flow, what your cash flow cycle is for your business, what's coming in over a period of time and what's going out. And you can use this budget. I always like my clients to make copies on a monthly basis. Sometimes you can use it on a weekly basis if you have a lot of money flowing in more consistently. But it's set up for a monthly basis. And then this tells us, where's that default? You know, where are we short on our cash, right? Where are we short on our cash flow? And what's that typical cycle of the cash that's going out of our business for operating expenses, payroll, rent, utilities, all of that? And then when is the other coming in? And where's that downfall? How long is that cycle actually? So is that an opportunity to not just help my cash flow, but in potentially I need more customers. So in borrowing money, can I actually get more clients, you know, acquired for my business with that borrowed money? So let's say you run a landscaping business potentially, and you want to replace an 8-year-old truck that's a little beaten up. You know, how, if buying a new truck, would that actually increase your revenue or reduce your costs? Not necessarily. You're just, you know, really kind of wanting to replace the truck. Now, if the truck isn't getting you from point A to point B, and that's what you need to do in your landscape business, that makes sense. But if the truck's just a little beaten up and you want the fresh red landscaping truck, you know, to show up at someone's house or on a commercial property, you know, is that the best time to buy that? No, it's not necessarily going to increase your revenue, and it's definitely not going to reduce your costs because it's going to be more expensive. So most of the time, that's not the answer. A lot of times I hear, and I think people in the room can agree, a lot of times I hear people say, I need capital to grow, right? But actually, they probably need capital to keep themselves in business. So, you know, mixing those two up, needing capital to grow and needing capital to stay in business, can be really risky. And there's most likely more systemic problems at hand with the business that your consultants, you know, can reach out and really dig into what some of those systems are to understand that better and create better processes. Yes, ma'am.
So what's an example of a systemic problem that might be getting in your way, so that people at home can kind of like be like, oh, is that what I'm really feeling? What are a couple examples of that?
Well, one thing is I would use this cash flow budget. So a lot of people, we touched on cash management, you know, earlier in the slides, and having a cash flow budget is cash management. So when we're looking at, and if you do your own financials, or you have a bookkeeper or accountant do your financials, you're going to see your profit and loss. You're going to see your balance sheet. But a lot of times you have access to the cash flow statement, but a lot of times businesses don't look at the cash flow statement because maybe you really don't understand what it is, you know. But the cash flow statement, the cash flow is that income coming in and then the expenses going out. So the systemic problem is, I don't know what my cash flow cycle is. I don't know normally when I am out of cash. Another example to that, Morgan, too, which I always find a little amusing, is at the end of the year when the CPA gives back the financial statements and it says, hey, you have a net profit of $40,000, and the business is like, where is it? I don't have any money in my bank, you know, or I have $5,000 in my bank. And that's part of cash flow. You know, that is where that money's going out, but yet, you know, your taxes are showing you're profitable, but you're like, where is the money? Well, it's been spent because the cash flow wasn't managed properly. So that is a whole nother course that we could do at another time on cash flow management that we go into detail with. That's actually where one of my
Twice
things.
a year, baby.
Okay.
Twice a year, right here at Square One.
That's what I actually love, digging into cash flow management and really helping clients see what their cycle is, so they understand how much sales do I have to have in order to cover just my fixed expenses, my break-even point, and then, you know, what do I need to be able to grow and expand and to cover anything else that I want to do. So anyway, businesses may occasionally need short-term financing, like a line of credit, in order to get through a slow season. The risk lies in confusing borrowing to grow your company with borrowing to tide over the business. So most banks are going to have their perspective, as Susan can attest to, can this business owner pay this money back, rather than, is this a good investment for the borrower? You know, can they pay it back, right? So first, a couple other things too to look at, and I kind of just touched on this with the tax returns, is be mindful of the deductions that you are taking for your business. Those deductions and expenses will play out in your tax returns. A lot of times at the end of the year, the accountant may say, okay, well, you're showing a nice profit on your return. Buy some equipment, buy some machinery. Well, you know what? If that equipment, machinery is going to give you a good return, then amen, go for that. That's awesome. But if it's not, and you're just doing it to lower your profit and your tax burden at the end of the year, that may hinder you when you go to the bank and you want to get a loan. Because remember, banks base their lending on your tax returns. So lowering your taxes or lowering your profit on your taxes, right? You may be decreasing your ability to borrow. Also keep that in mind if anyone's in a place that their business is growing and they're looking at exiting the business or succession planning in the next 3 to 5 years, 10 years. You want to continue to have the profits built and continue to build those, because somebody wanting to buy your business is not going to want to see that it's not profitable. They want to see, because you bought equipment to lower your tax burden on your business profit tax, they want to see that there's value in this business, so that then again, you can get more money, out of the business when you go to sell it. And then secondly, when you're borrowing money for your business, keep your personal credit clean. Things are based on your personal credit. Just keep it really clean. A lot of lending decisions are based on personal credit. I recommend, and Susan, you could probably say this too, pull your credit report every year. There's different organizations, annualcreditreport.com, creditkarma.com, and check for those mistakes too. So check and see that the information that's on your credit report is current, is valid, and look for any mistakes, because they could definitely hurt you down the road. Any comments on any of that?
I fully agree. What she said. What Jill said. But one of the things that banks look for is they call it the 3 C's of credit, and there's 5 C's, there's 7 C's, but just the basics are the cash flow, the character, and the collateral. And the character, we do look at your personal. You cannot separate yourself. Sometimes I get new business owners that want to separate themselves from the business. Well, why does my credit score matter? It matters because you're paying you're running the business, and the loan officer has to, if they haven't known you for 20 years, looking at your credit score sort of helps build the character picture to move forward.
Absolutely.
It's really important.
I always ask people and challenge them about their household, the household budget. How do you handle your personal household budget is pretty much going to be a picture of how you're going to handle your business budget. And that may have just scared a lot of people watching this, because they're like, I don't have a household budget, right? And yet that's in order, how do you determine what you would like to pay yourself when you're making money at some point in your business, to cover your personal household budget. And that's definitely a conversation we can have too, but definitely look at your personal household budget too. So no matter how great your business idea is, one essential element of startup success is your ability to obtain sufficient funding and to start and grow your business. Megan, if you'll actually go to slide 5 and go ahead and play the Kauffman sketchbook. This is a little sketchbook of, where you can find sufficient funding to start and grow your business. Where do entrepreneurs get their money? So let's play this, and it just takes a few moments.
You want to come watch on mine?
Well, I
think
think
it's
yours.
Let me see.
Most young companies need money, which may or may not come as a big surprise, but they do. The number one source they get money from is from their own savings. Whether it's a few $100s or even thousands of dollars, that's what we tend to tap first. And a lot of companies don't get money from any other place. They get money from their own savings. And then after that, they're lucky enough to be cash flow positive. They're profitable. So we talk a lot as if all companies require all sorts of external capital. And the reality is that more than half of young companies get all their funding from a combination of founder savings and then cash flow from the business. And we're out of here. Next up on the list is another one that catches, I think, people by surprise, and that's credit cards. almost every young company you can think of, to one degree or another, was funded on credit card. And it is the single largest source of capital for young companies after founder savings. And then the next place where they tend to get money is from friends and family. After I've tapped out my credit card and I've used up all my savings, I turn to people I know and say, hey, will you help me? And that's the third biggest source of capital. And then the next place is banks. And the banks are a totally weird situation, because with banks, they get a lot of attention, but they actually fund very, very few young companies. But it's not their fault. You have to think about the way bank lending works and how shareholders want banks to lend. They want them to lend money against secured assets. And young companies don't have any security. They have nothing to secure it against. And the joke in the industry is you can get all the bank funding you want as a startup as long as you don't need it. And then the last piece is venture capitalists. They get the lion's share of the attention, which in some ways is warranted. You know, your Googles and Apples and FedExes and many others all have venture capital money inside of them. But the reality is, and this is from Kauffman research, less than 20% of the fastest growing companies in the United States took any venture money. And that's not because the VCs wouldn't give it to them. It's because they didn't want it or didn't need it, because they had all those other sources. I don't need money, and I certainly don't need money on these terms, because venture capitalists, unlike banks, they don't lend against secured assets. They give you money in exchange for shares. So they take some of your company away. So my answer is if you don't need it, definitely don't get it. There's no question the venture industry has become staid. The irony is it's intended to fund disruption, and yet it's an industry that had become complacent. And interestingly, over the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen the emergence of other mechanisms for funding, like AngelList, like these kinds of peer-to-peer funding sources, as people increasingly provide capital in smaller amounts, but more people doing it directly. Having said all of that, though, venture capitalists are hugely important for those young companies that don't have access to bank money, but are growth companies. They have the prospect of being a $5 million or a $10 million company in a couple of years, and they need that growth capital to get there quickly. So it's a race. And the way you play the race is by getting money from people like venture capitalists who give you the money so you can compete with other people who are racing as fast as you are. If you can run a company off cash flow and some combination of credit card, your own savings, and friends and family, Bob's your uncle. Run. Keep all the equity, because there's no better thing than being in full control of your own destiny.
Next slide too. But that's so true. If you can run a company, and we talked about cash flow, so how important that is, and your own savings too. And then of course, small business loans are available from a large number of traditional and alternative lenders. So any of these type of loans can help your business grow, fund new research and development, help you expand into new markets, new products, new territories, enhance your sales and marketing efforts, and allow you to hire new people, right? So there are several that were mentioned on that particular video. There's multiple types of small business loans that are available, and the options vary depending on your business needs, the length of the loan, the specific term of the loan. So we're going to talk about a few of the small business loans that are available under a small business line of credit. Your business can access funds from the lender as needed. There's normally a cap, on the funds accessible. $100,000, $50,000. But a line of credit is really useful for managing that company's cash flow, guys, and any of those unexpected expenses. Then you've got, as Susan and I have talked about accounts receivable before, there's some banks out there and some lenders that will do an accounts receivable line of credit. And that line of credit is secured by the company's accounts receivable, right? So as your accounts receivable line allows you to get more cash in immediately, and it's based on the terms of what that balance is in your net 30 versus your net 90, 120, 180. But you can get more cash, when you have a shorter term of your accounts receivable. Then as you're getting that money in from your vendors, the accounts receivable line of credit is paid down, and that interest rate's variable, and the banks can talk to you more about that too. Then you've got working capital loans. So that's a debt borrowing vehicle used for a company to finance its daily operations. We need help with some of our daily operations. Sometimes, companies will use these loans to manage fluctuations in those revenues and expenses due to seasonality or other circumstances in their business. A lot of my construction companies will use a working capital loan because if they're a subcontractor working for a GC, in their contract, it may be paid when paid. The subcontractor is not getting paid until the GC gets paid by the developer, and the subcontractor is utilizing all of his funds and money to pay his employees, labor, equipment usage, and that could be 30, 60, 90, 120, 180 days, depending on who your GC is. So that working capital loan, you could do a line of credit with that. You could do a working capital loan to allow and manage that fluctuation with some of your cash flow. Normally, the working capital loans are unsecured, but companies that have little or no credit history will typically have to pledge, some kind of collateral for the loan and personally guarantee though.
The house is off their personal residence. Sometimes if you've got equity, it's a great source
Absolutely.
of security.
Yeah, the house, a building, sometimes equipment and vehicles, but definitely the house is that biggest asset. And then working capital loans too tend to be short term, so anywhere from 30 days to a year. And then you've got some of the small business term loans, typically set for a dollar amount, and used for the business operations, capital expenditures, expansions. And those term loans could be secured or unsecured. Interest could be variable or fixed too. And they're good for small businesses that need capital for growth or for those large one-time expenditures. The SBA does loan programs with a lot of banks that they help the banks lend to more entrepreneurs because the SBA helps reduce the risk for that lending institution. So it's guaranteed by the SBA, the interest rate and the repayment terms, and normally the down payment are a lot more favorable than most loans. But I will tell you that the loan process is a little time consuming too, and there are very strict requirements for those eligible small businesses. And then of course there's other loans like an equipment loan, typically a down payment of 20% and secured by the equipment itself. So secondly, I have friends and family on there, and an old standby, as the Kauffman sketchbook shared too, for business owners is getting family members to invest in your business, but truly to preserve your personal relationship and those upcoming family holiday dinners, right? You need to have frank, honest communication and conversations with these would-be investors, your family members. So create these clear line of communication, what the role is for everyone in there, what the terms are, and what the expectations are for any gifts and or loans given by your family and friends to give you that access to the capital that you need. And then in recent times, definitely we saw a lot more in the past 18 months, throughout the pandemic. Large corporations have funded grants to help small and to support small businesses. Look out in your supply chain. There might be some corporations that are doing some grants for your industry or that support marginalized groups as well too. Currently, something that came up with us is Crescendo calling TikTok. So TikTok and the Hispanic Heritage Foundation announced a launch of Crescendo calling TikTok, where they actually have a grant program that's a social investment of $150,000 and to recognize and support Hispanic entrepreneurs who are pivoting from the crisis. And what they're looking is selecting 30 business owners that they will give a $5,000 grant. A grant does not need to be paid back. A grant. So that deadline is through September 30th. Megan, if you want to put up the KC SourceLink site too. KC SourceLink is one of our resource partners in our building, and they do a great site that has passed. So some of these are older corporate fund availabilities, but current as well too. And on KC SourceLink site, when you jump on there, kcsourcelink.com, you can go into the middle box on funding, and then about 3/4 of the way the page down, you'll see all different opportunities for funding, but to some of those local, marginalized, corporate, different, the county, there's a lot of county fundings too, the community capital funds, that are based on your business location address. So take a look at that for grants that are available, that are out there that maybe you weren't aware of. Another loan mechanism are microloans. Microloans are small loans issued by individuals rather than banks or credit unions. They're issued by a single individual or aggregated across a number of individuals who each contribute to the portion of that total amount for that microloan. We refer an organization out of St. Louis, Justine Peterson. They serve a lot of our existing and startup businesses, and it's safe, affordable capital with the goal of graduating your business to the mainstream funds that banks give you. So once again, getting that relationship with the bank, but the microloan is a little bit easier, a little bit higher interest rate, but an easier way to get approved. But we really want you to have that relationship with the bank. You'll see loans with micro loans from $500 to $50,000, sometimes $150,000. Locally, AltCAP is an organization that offers several different types of microloans too. Some of the specific ones that are on AltCAP site, which is alt-cap.org/microloans, are specific for artists and home rehabbers. So I would definitely earmark their site because they do have different microloans where, once again, that aggregated amount, the individuals contributing, or they're getting some federal or corporate monies too that they can put into their microloans and utilize for some of the startups or established moms and pops and nonprofits as well too. Right now, just to keep on your radar, AltCAP is hosting a pitch competition to win cash awards and access to technical assistance resources to accelerate growth. So if you're interested in that, jump on their site, and that deadline is October 5th. Another fund that is created through the Missouri SBDC at UMKC and through our technology pillar is Digital Sandbox. Digital Sandbox KC provides critical proof of concept funding, mentoring and connections to help founders, technology founders, build viable innovations ready for follow-up funding. So those are pitches as well as consulting with the pitches, and then Digital Sandbox awards project grants four times per year, normally up to about $25,000. And that is digitalsandboxkc.com. As the Kauffman sketchbook said too, a number of credit card issuers, and Susan and I were talking about that too, they cater to the small business market. And several come with, benefits, right? Cashback rewards, airline miles points, other perks. So some issuers require that the card be tied to the owner's personal credit score, credit history, and a guarantee from the owner. But keep in mind, with most credit cards, the rates are a lot higher. And it's you want to be a little wary in utilizing those for everything, or at least understanding, once again, that cash flow management of paying those back, in that 30-day cycle. A lot of, like I said, the interest rates are a little bit higher, and sometimes there's low interest or no interest introductory charges for a few months. But once again, as I mentioned earlier, some of those introductory promotional things always creep up. So with credit cards, it's the rate that will normally creep up. I've heard from a lot of businesses that have used crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is a practice to raise funding through multiple funders. So often via popular crowdfunding websites. It gives startups the opportunity to raise that startup funding for the business. And then, you can promote yourself, promote your products. The key to a successful crowdfunding campaign, though, is to have a compelling story about your products, your service, your company, and then to offer a meaningful reward for that donation too. But that compelling story really drives, the interest in the crowd fund and the amount that most people will donate to that crowd fund. Investors, angel investors, but most types of investors are individuals who invest in startup or early stage companies and for an exchange of equity ownership. If you're looking for an angel investor or any type of investor, same thing, work with your banker, work with an attorney, work with your consultants too, to understand how much can you afford to give up, or do you want to, of your company, what that could look like, in different phases of growth of your company, because it doesn't all have to be in the initial phase of your company. It could be spread out through different phases of your company. But most angel investors, they really care about the quality and passion and commitment of and the integrity of the owners, the market opportunity that that you can have, and then a really clear, thought out business plan for your business, and any early evidence in obtaining traction, for that business plan. And then, of course, if there's any interesting technology or intellectual property, they like to invest in that too. And then lastly, as was stated in the Kauffman sketchbook, that venture capital. Startups seeking financing often turn to venture capital, VC firms. They can provide capital, strategic assistance, introductions to potential customers, partners, and employees. They're not easy, or capital financing through VCs that aren't easy to obtain. They typically want to invest in startups, as they say, Googles and Ubers and things that are pursuing big opportunities with really high growth potential. And that has shown some traction, in the marketplace, that have a working product prototype, early customer adoption. So those are some different ways to get not just startup, but definitely growth funding for your business. And then lastly, a lot of us have been on through this past 18 months, the SBA.gov site. The Small Business Administration provided funding for a lot of businesses that was needed throughout this past year. PPP, the Payroll Protection Program 1 and 2, restaurant revitalization funding, shuttered venue for event space funding. And we hope that you've taken advantage of any and all of these programs if you qualified through the SBA, through their CARES Act, through the American Rescue Plan Act. There still are programs available. The Employee Retention Credit is actually through the IRS. That is a program for businesses that are retaining employees that have seen a decrease in their sales quarter over quarter. That is something to work with your payroll company, your accountant, and some consultants know more about it, as well as can direct you in the direction to go with that. And then the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan, the EIDL loan, still currently available, but there's also some targeted and supplemental grants affiliated with that for minority-owned businesses, as well as where you're located. So on the SBA.gov, if you go into funding and then COVID funding, and under the EIDL tab, you will see more on the targeted and supplemental grants that are available through there. Reach out to your banks, your librarians, your SCORE partners, and then your SBDC consultants to learn more about, these pre-growth and growth funding opportunities. So, yes, thank you for your time. Any questions, comments?
I do have a comment, and this is for Morgan actually,
Oh.
because when we used to do these programs in person 2 years ago before the pandemic, I think maybe Morgan had classified the grant situation as the grant fairy. Like, there's really don't depend on grants. Well, I'm sensing that things have really changed.
Things changed dramatically the first 4 months of COVID. So if you were hanging out in mid-2020, the landscape was different. And that's a sign of my hope in humanity, right? It's because we had these businesses that were established and were struggling. And in a lot of places, if they could not pivot to online, then they had no channel with which to conduct business. And you saw a lot of private and public funding come out for them. Now, that still doesn't mean, because if what you heard Jill say today was, if you're starting a business, you should get a grant, that is not what's going on.
Right.
We can talk about a load of other options for you on how to start a business. But the grant funding is for specific things or specific kinds of people. One of the two. So my proclamation that the grant fairy will probably not visit you still stands, but there are also a completely new type and set of grants from people that we never thought would do that before that are available. So if you're working in childcare, which FYI everybody, there is a child care crisis. If you want to open a business and be busy tomorrow, come talk to us about the business of childcare. It's a ton of grants right now for those kinds of businesses, but there's going to be a lot of stipulations in there. And the first thing I'm going to do is say, hey, have you heard of the UMKC SBDC? And you should go talk to them, because grants are no joke. Jill, getting a grant and keeping a grant is hard work.
Absolutely. There's a lot of deliverables. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. To your point too, there's, I mean, like you said, corporations, are wrapping their
Yes.
arms around the small businesses in their industries. Of course, with the restaurant revitalization, that got depleted. They're wanting to fill that back up. There's Congress and lobbying that's happening to fill that back up. Fitness centers is another one too. They're trying to, pull monies together and look at, of course, Casey SourceLink has the corporate grants out there, but definitely look through your industry trade publications, newsletters, national associations, and find out if there are grants specific, because we can't keep track of all of them. I mean, it is just, there's little things that will populate, that you'll hear about. And by the time we hear it, I hate to say, not that the deadline may be over, but there's just been thousands or hundreds of thousands of people applying. And, it may be a low man on the totem pole. We don't know. But I don't say don't apply. I mean, if it's still available, 9 times out of 10, we've probably missed the deadline because there's just so much out there. So trying to get on some of those news publications of what's available, and be that first and foremost. But really, that background is, what is your story? What is a compelling story? Why do you need this money? It's not just, hey, I need to keep my doors open. Talk to us about what that story really is. Make it compelling, which all of our businesses are compelling because, of course, we're supporting ourselves, our industries, our families, our employees, our community. But really talk about that story and the value that you can create within your family, your employees, your community, all around in your industry.
And start preparing now.
Absolutely.
Because those grants roll.
Right.
And get to know your financial documents. Here's the good news. If you've never wanted to look before, or you look with a hand over your eyes, there are so many people in Kansas City that you can sign up to talk to and get to know your financial documents. But don't go looking for grants and then prepare your financial documents.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing we saw this past 18 months was get all of your ducks in a row ahead of time, so that you are prepared with those documents, with the package of information that you can just upload or, share with your banker. A couple things that Megan did send out too are some financing options, which touches on a lot of the different financing that I shared in this little discussion: credit card, bank, factoring. We didn't even talk about that, but definitely take a look at these. And then, as Morgan just touched on, the lender information. This is a list of those documents to prepare, your company profile, your company documents, your financing documents. So take a look at this very easy little activity sheet. Already exists? Yes or no? Does it need to be created? Yes or no? So anything that's marked no, get to work on that. And I'd be glad to take any questions from the audience, from the chat. Any comments or anything would be well received. Mike?
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about one way that businesses can raise funds is by raising the cost of their goods.
Mhm.
And
Raising their retail price,
yeah,
not the cost of their goods.
Yes, their retail.
Uh-huh.
But I know that business owners, they worry about how much they can raise that. And or that will affect whether or not their customers will come back or not. And so you said that you mentioned it would be typically 10%.
10% is normally not noticed by the customer, depending on the type of good or product or service it is. Sure, if it's a $50,000, service package or a piece of equipment, 10% is a pretty large chunk of change, but somebody who's going to buy that, 10% isn't going to be too outrageous with it. But if it's over that, if it's a pair of shoes, then over 10%, or let's say a service, I think it makes more sense on a service, then over that, then we have to get their buy-in, their emotional buy-in. So I always tell people that if they're Can I just hit this?
Yep.
If we can get their buy-in, but letting people know, I always tell people, let them know at least 30 days ahead of time that this is what your new pricing is going to be. So if you used to charge $25 for lawn mowing and you're looking to raise it to $30, $35, then let the customer know. If they know, like, and love you, they're going to accept it. If they may look around a little bit too, but yet you've also got to give them the value of what your value and benefit is for them to buy from you. You know, but if they know, like, and love you, then they're seeing that value too.
Okay.
So it depends on the product or service, package of service that you're offering. But get the customer buy-in by letting them know. If you're open and honest and communicate ahead of time versus doing it on the back end, hey, I'm buying this, and, you know, they're seeing this charge. I mean, they're caught between a rock and a hard place, and, you know, it's frustrating for them. So you want to maintain that relationship.
Okay.
Any other thoughts or comments?
Thanks for being here today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate it. Always good to see people, you know, so.
I do have one quick thing I just wanted to mention, that our next Eat and Educate here at Central Bank of the Midwest on our Parkville branch will be November 17th. And that class registration is not live yet. It'll be live on October 1st. It will be a panel discussion led by Jenny Miller of KC SourceLink with panelists who've completed some of the, what we call them, the scalar growth programs in Kansas City.
Mhm.
So
Some of my
So
clients
for
are
that.
on there, so I'm
Yeah.
excited for that. That'll be a good opportunity for people to talk one-to-one with businesses that, you know, are growing and scaling. Absolutely.
that's it.
Cool. Megan, you want to come back on and talk about the survey?
Okay, well, thanks for being here with us today. I did post a link to the survey in the chat. I will send an email out for folks who have registered as well, so please do take a minute and fill that out for us. And if you want to connect with anyone on our team for a one-on-one, you can reach out to us. I'll drop our email in the chat at square1@mymcpl.org. And we'll hope to see you next time. The class Susan just mentioned is the same, still a Wednesday, still 11:45. It's November 17th. So save the date. We'll get that registration up soon, like Susan said, and we'll hope to see you there. Thanks everyone for coming today. Bye.
Bye. Have a great Wednesday.